Should they do a mic check?
Yeah, we checked them already, so you should be good. Yes, I will give a little spiel.
And then I'll follow her. Yeah.
So, the stream has started. We just want to do a quick sound check.
Yes.
Out on a phone, just to make sure everything's set up. But
Do you want me to do it?
And you shouldn't have to get too close, but we'll see what they say.
Should I just say something?
Yeah. If you want to just talk, you can bring it up on your phone.
Okay. Okay. Should I say something? It's working? He said I should do a sound check.
Oh, okay.
March 11th. I'll just say something. March 11th, 2024. You hear? Okay. Okay, testing. 1, 2, 3, 4, testing. Testing, 1, 2, 3, 4, testing. Testing, 1, 2, 3, 4, testing.
You have 30 seconds. I'm watching. 6 o'clock. We're starting.
Wouldn't be a great picture.
Well, you're already on the live. The live stream's going, Denise. Alrighty, it's 6 o'clock, so we are going to get started. I am Dawn Smith. I am the Vice President of the Greater Green Bay League of Women Voters, and I am also the co-chair of our Voter Services Committee. We are hosting every year, we host forums for local candidates to give voters an opportunity to hear what their candidates have to say. We try really, really hard to stay nonpartisan and fair. And this is just an opportunity and something that we do for you. The league has been around a really long time. We're a really fun group of people. So if anybody is interested in joining, you're absolutely welcome. Just look up our website. We are live streaming the forum tonight to our YouTube page. So you can go out if you have anybody that misses it and wants to see it. It will be live, real time, 30-second delay, but it will be available afterwards too. We will also share a link to the forum on our YouTube page. I want to thank our timekeepers, our moderator, Jean Marsh, and all our League of Women Voter volunteers. We also did put QR codes on the chairs. We took feedback from our forums last year based on the sound quality of the video and the amount of time it took to get it posted. And we have hired a videographer for all 4 of the forums we're doing this spring. If you are interested in making a donation to help support these forums as we move forward, there is a QR code to our PayPal. And thank you. Jean?
Thank you, Dawn, and welcome to our candidates for the De Pere School Board, Matt Peterson and Brandy Tollefson. And thank you for taking time to attend this forum and become informed about this important election. First, a brief word about the League. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan political organization encouraging informed and active participation of citizens in government. It influences public policy through education and advocacy. The League never supports or opposes any political party or candidate. League members will review and send the questions from the audience to me so that I can present them to the candidates. Similar questions might be consolidated so that we can address as many issues as possible. Questions that are addressed to only one candidate or questions that state an opinion or are not related to this election will not be asked. The timekeepers for this forum are League members Jean and Don Dahlstrom. Prior to the start of the forum, the first person to speak was determined by a pre-selected number closest to a predetermined number. I will alternate each question between candidates so that each candidate has the opportunity to respond first. Candidates will have equal time to share their perspectives. This forum will run for 1.5 hours. We'll begin with opening statements, 2-minute opening statements, and we'll start with Dr. Peterson.
Hello, everybody. Hello. Thanks so much for coming. I am honored that you chose to be here on a sunny 60-degree evening. And I am very happy to be here talking about the De Pere School Board. I was fortunate to be appointed to a vacancy last October, and wouldn't you know it, I like the job so much that I decided to reapply, and that's why I'm here today. I grew up in Seymour, Wisconsin, and I've lived in De Pere with my wife and 2 kids for 16 years. I have a PhD in human physiology and work as a biology professor at NWTC and also in an administrative role. I believe that I bring a couple of perspectives to the school board that can be helpful. First and foremost, I am a parent of 2 Redbirds, and I think that it's much easier to be emotionally invested in the schools when your kids are there as well. I bring with me the expertise of a career educator, someone who's very passionate about excellent public education, and I also have the perspective of someone who wants to listen to every perspective and truly understand how others feel before I make a decision. I'll also throw in that I am a very stubborn optimist, and I have the gut feeling that that I refuse to give up, that there is a way for public education to serve every single kid, and I will not give up until we find that way. Thank you.
Ms. Peterson? Tollefson, excuse me. Ms. Tollefson. Not married.
Hi, my name is Brandy Tollefson, and I am also a mother of currently 2 Redbirds. My oldest graduated last year. I have one in 6th grade at Foxview and one as junior in the high school. My professional qualifications. I hear myself quite well. Can you hear me better? Can you hear me better? Yeah. Yay! Okay. Professionally, I have been an accounting manager for the last 17 years for a company that owns hotels. Although we have over 300 employees, our corporate office is quite small. So I have a hand in everything from operations, HR, payroll, accounting. I'm involved in all policy changes and decisions. I've implemented systems company-wide, done all the research and implementation on that. I've written and given reviews for our regional managers, which all I feel like is really relevant to being on a school board. It's sort of just that large oversight that I do at our corporate office is similar to what the board does for our schools. I have a degree in anthropology and was an archaeologist for 7 years before switching to accounting. So that's kind of an interesting fact. I also just really believe in listening to every voice that comes in, making sure that everyone walks away with an understanding of the decision, not necessarily agreeing with every decision, but an understanding. And I think that's really important. And I think it's important for the board members as well to have an understanding of what each other is trying to say, even if you're not reaching an agreement with each other. And so that is my goal, is to always help people feel like they were heard and they understand where I'm coming from.
Thank you. Well, the first question we'll address to you, Ms. Tollefson, and it's regarding immunizations. Recently in Illinois, there's been 2 cases of measles. Who in your district checks our students' records, and is the health department in charge?
Who checks the records?
Right, that was the question.
I only know from my own experience of enrolling my kids in the schools here, we had to provide them to the district. I think it was just within the offices of the schools that they were attending. I assume those roll up to the district nurse. I don't know for sure the answer on that. I guess that is something that I would have to look more into. It's not something I'm very familiar with.
Dr. Peterson?
I also don't know process-wise exactly how that rolls up to the school nurse's office, but I would expect that there are processes in place for all of our incoming kindergartners and new students to the district that put them in contact with our school nurse and ensure that they've received all of the required immunizations.
Thank you. The next question we'll address to Dr. Peterson to start out with, and that is, what role do you feel diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives should play in district policy?
Thank you for that question. I think that diversity, equity, and inclusion has become a political touch point, and I do not feel it needs to be that way, because when it really comes down to it, it is public education's job to educate every child. Every child. That's not a controversial idea to me. So whenever we see a child that is struggling to learn, it is our job as a school to figure out how we can meet that student's needs. There are a lot of ways that we can continue to explore how to best reach students, and every student's different. So I think it's incumbent on us to hire teachers and staff members who are willing to reach students where they are, meet them where they are, and also to support teachers and staff so that they feel like they have the support to sometimes go a little bit outside of the box where they can reach a kid. I also am supportive of efforts that we have to hire a diverse workforce. I think that makes us better as a school and better as a community. But it does require us to have the processes in place that we can support diverse staff.
Ms. Tollefson?
So again, I agree that just the term alone feels like it's some kind of political term, but in reality, the facts are that students are going to do better if they see themselves represented or feel safe in the environment where they are learning. If that means hiring more diverse teachers that kids can relate to, or if it means making sure that our libraries and our classrooms include books that are as diverse as the students that are in the classrooms so that they feel like they are represented and welcome at all times, we're going to get better results out of their learning. So I think that's important.
Thank you. We'll start with you, Ms. Tollefson, for the third question. Do you support the current referendum, and why?
Why, yes, I do. I spent last summer on the community task force that was working on the recommendations for the school board for the referendum. So I feel quite knowledgeable about the needs that the district has for the referendums and why they're going to referendum. I am completely supportive of the strategy that Dr. Thompson has chosen to use in rolling out the referendum slowly and going back specifically for the one that got the response in the surveys of the community saying that they weren't ready to support, which is the new high school or new building. taking a lot more time, really putting that on the shelf and getting more community feedback, getting the community involved, and educating the community on why the need is there, what it's going to look like if we don't do something, and versus if we do, how we would reconfigure the schools, and let people feel like they actually had a say in that design, and what's going into that and what their money is going to is the right approach to hopefully get everyone to feel like they are buying in to the vision of what the school district is trying to accomplish for our students and teachers.
Dr. Peterson?
I just want to thank Brandy and many community members who took part in that panel and that committee last summer. They did fantastic work to put a plan together. There's still details that have to be worked out. I also strongly support the referendum that is on the ballot in April. That's an operational referendum that's really about filling in gaps because our state funding does not necessarily keep up with inflation, and the COVID federal dollars are running out as of September. So I feel that we need this referendum to pass so we can continue the services that we offer to students. The result of not passing the referendum would hurt kids. Our class sizes wouldn't necessarily go up. We would lose staff members. We would not be able to maintain the same level of services that we have regarding technology. And also, this was news to me when I got to be a part of the board. But we have bus routes that are an hour and a half long, one way, for students that are in the southern part of our district. And with the passing of this referendum, we can cut those bus routes to below an hour, which is still a long ride for a kindergartner on a bus. But right now, some of our kindergartners are getting picked up at like 6:11 in the morning and not getting to school until 7:45. And I think that we can do better for our kids. That's just one small way that this referendum would allow us to meet kids and continue the services that we have, and in some cases improve the services. I also feel as though we have a really great problem on our hands in this community, which is a lot of people want to go to school here and a lot of people want to live here. And that means that we are going to have to find space for more kids in the coming decade, and there's a lot of different ways we can do that, but that doesn't change the fact that we do need more space.
Okay. The next question will start with you, Dr. Peterson, and it's regarding book banning. The question is, I recently heard an interview of high school teachers in Oklahoma who cannot use the book Killers of the Flower Moon in their history classes for fear of being disciplined. Without referencing the book, they cannot teach accurately the historic environment that allowed events to occur. What would your approach be to banning books?
Thank you for the question. I think we can all agree that we have to be mindful of the age appropriateness of materials. There are of course books that are maybe not age appropriate for elementary school kids, and we need to continue to all agree on finding materials that are appropriate for kids of different ages. However, we owe it to our kids to teach history accurately. We also owe it to our kids to let them experience the stories of people who are different than them. I think that we have a role in this community to push our society forward in understanding others who are different than us. That's the role of education. We also want to continue to keep good relationships with our families. I think our teachers do an amazing job of communicating to parents just what materials kids are reading so that we never surprise parents. I think that that's something that we need to continue to do is keep those lines of communication open. But hopefully we can help parents understand the value of materials that expose students to different stories.
Ms. Tellefson?
I agree that our schools do a fantastic job of communicating what's going to be read in the classrooms, what your child is going to be exposed to, whether that's the teacher reading out loud in the younger grades or even up through high school. When a class is reading a book all together, we get emails and any concerns that might be in that book are in the email as well, so the parents can make the best decision for them and their family. I do also believe that our schools have a great system of alerting teachers and administrators if parents have concerns. I myself have reached out to a teacher at one point when one of my children was in middle school with a concern about something that was being discussed in the classroom. It was immediately addressed by the teacher, brought to the principal. They asked to have a meeting with me and my husband so that we could all make sure that everybody was happy with the resolution and what the concerns were and, you know, how it got there. I was completely satisfied with the resolution and the response by the school and everyone involved. And I think that if there are any books out there that teachers parents individually have issues with, taking that process, going through that, if they're not getting the response, bringing that up, I think by the time the school board would be getting involved, it would have to be something on a much larger scale that is not getting resolved at that level. And to my knowledge, that doesn't happen very often in our district. Those kinds of concerns come all the way up to the school board. So I think our schools do a fantastic job of listening to the parents' concerns when there are concerns.
Thank you. The next question will start with you, Ms. Tollefson, and is, what do you see as the major issues facing the De Pere School District and public education?
We've already kind of touched on what I believe the number one issue is, and that is the lack of funding. And that comes all the way from the state level. It has nothing to do with our district. All districts around us have already gone to referendum within the last few years. We're the last one to go. So we're not alone in this process or unique to the needs of the shortcomings of what the state is funding for our students. That falls back on teachers and teachers' compensation. If we're not funding our schools properly, we're not taking care of the people who are educating and with our kids every single day, and we're going to start losing those teachers to other districts that are able to offer them smaller class sizes, offer them better compensation. So that's why, again, the referendum is just so important, and that we need to solve that before we can really focus on anything else right now.
Dr. Peterson?
Yeah, I would agree. Close to home, the biggest thing that the De Pere School District is facing is the various referenda that are going to be put in front of us in the next couple of years. Because of the amazing growth we have in this district, we will have potentially 500 to 700 more kids living in this district in the next decade. And that's a massive amount of growth that we can't handle without expanding facilities. At the same time, like Brandy said, we have a responsibility to our teachers and staff to meet their needs. We need to continue to have systems in place, compensation in place, and create the right circumstances that people want to work here. And not just anybody, the best people. We also have a long-term concern that's on my mind often. We have 4,500 kids in the De Pere School District right now, and we need some of them someday to become teachers and staff members. We need to create a circumstance where we show them that that working at a school is a wonderful job and a wonderful career. And that means that we have to treat the people who work for us now as well as we can. And as a community, we have to show that we together respect the people who work in schools and that it's an honorable profession to chase after. The last thing is we have to continue to have the trust of our community. We can feel at times political divisions creeping into our schools, and they don't belong there. Political divisions don't belong there. We need community partnership, not people bickering.
The next question, we'll start with you, Dr. Peterson. Where did you stand on the recent debate over whether flags or symbols should be allowed in the classroom?
Well, I happened to be on the board the last time that this came up, but prior to becoming a board member, I was a community member and a concerned parent listening in on this conversation. And I have to say that I felt the flag debate took an enormous amount of time and resource away from real conversations about learning. I've heard people say that, and these were some of the people who proposed this flag ban, and if you're not familiar with it, the idea was to really ban any sort of flags that didn't have prior approval from being on school grounds. But in my opinion, they really were targeting one particular flag, and that was the gay pride flag. I voted against that banning. I felt as though anything that we can do as a school district to create safe spaces that include students, especially students like our LGBTQ students, that are 6 times more likely to be depressed, 4 times more likely to attempt suicide. Any small actions we can take to promote an environment where they feel like they're part of the school and they're welcome and it's their school too, I stand behind those efforts to be inclusive. And I also just want to say that this is a mental health issue. So I was opposed to any sort of ban on the gay pride flag. Thinking about those kids that are sitting in class wondering, do I belong here? And potentially seeing a small symbol of inclusion is enough to get them through another day.
Ms. Tellefson?
I agree with everything Matt just said. I think the biggest thing to point out again is the kids who identify with the pride flag are at the highest risk of suicide. I have an analogy of kids who have a peanut allergy. We are not going to allow peanuts in that class just because other kids really like them and they're unhappy with not being able to eat them. We're going to take care of the kid who is most likely to suffer the most from the consequences of the decision. And that to me is the same as the pride flag. The kids who are most at risk are the ones who are most at risk at suicide. They need that little bit of support, and those are the ones that we should be prioritizing in that debate. Personally, I found out last week that my cousin is trans and tried to hang himself. And it just reiterates that if he had had that in his life anywhere, he maybe wouldn't be going through what he's going through now. So that's a real personal example of why it matters that there are real people out there who are suffering with this. And it's every day. There's families that have those stories. So
The next question, we will start with you, Ms. Tolson, and that is, what do you see as the primary work of the Board of Education?
I see the primary work as being a conduit between the community and the parents and the teachers and administration to be able to be there as a sanity check for the decisions that the teachers and the administration are making for our students, because they're the ones that are in the classrooms and in the buildings having to make day-to-day decisions. And when those bigger decisions need to be made and they bring to the board their recommendations, I believe that's who we should be listening to. Of course, there needs to be a sanity check on that. There needs to be a sounding board on that. And there needs to be somebody who is representing the parents and the community's best interest in those decisions as well. And I believe that that's what the board is there to do. One thing I don't believe the board is there to do is to come with their own agenda on what policies and decisions should be made. It should be a conduit of the opinion of the people and the parents that they're representing, and making sure that it's the community as a whole that they're supporting.
Dr. Peterson?
I've really found it to be an interesting role in that I believe the board serves many masters. The community, families, our teachers and staff who work at the school, but the primary group that we serve is, of course, our kids. So our primary role is to make sure that our kids are getting what they need, and the people who work closely with our kids every day have what they need to do the best job possible. I think the board largely sets the culture of our district. And I think we can aspire for a board who supports our administration and our teachers and staff fully, but also asks some tough questions, because it is the board's job also to allocate resources. And we need the community to trust that the board is asking tough questions about whether we're spending our dollars wisely. I think that has come up often as I've been knocking on doors over the last couple of weeks and months talking about this campaign. We have a lot of people in De Pere who are very behind the schools, but also want to make sure that their tax dollars are being spent wisely. My favorite conversation I had this weekend was with a gentleman whose kids graduated from De Pere schools, and they're adults in their 30s. So he could reasonably wash his hands of caring about the schools, but he said, and I quote, "Education is not a place to skimp." So I really like that approach, but I do think we owe it to that taxpayer and all of our taxpayers to make sure that we're putting our dollars where they're going to have the most impact.
The next question, we'll start with Dr. Peterson. Do you believe teachers should be armed in schools?
I think they should be armed with knowledge and expertise. I do not believe that guns belong in schools. I believe that that's the last thing that we want teachers thinking about and worrying about. I think that generally speaking, more guns in a place where there are a lot of kids and a lot of action is likely to result in disaster many more times than it's likely to resolve a situation. So I would be very fervently against any effort to bring more guns guns into our schools in the first place. And that's really all I can say about that one.
Yes.
First, I would like to say that I thought you asked if we want teachers to be harmed in our schools, and I couldn't figure out how to answer that. I completely agree. I don't see any need. I don't see any benefit to arming teachers in our schools. The consequences that could go wrong far outweigh the reasoning behind allowing guns in our schools. I think if our teachers are truly feeling unsafe, hopefully they would approach the board, and there are many other solutions that could be looked at long before you got to the point of putting guns in classrooms that would hopefully help them to feel like their classroom and the environment is safe.
The next question, we'll start with Ms. Tellefson. The question was written in cursive, so it says, if you can read this, you are taught cursive.
Oh.
I was. Do you believe it is necessary, and that is to teach cursive?
Oh. That's a really interesting question. My daughter, who's in 6th grade, is fascinated with cursive right now because it's like a foreign language to her. And she can't believe that I can read it, which is adorable, but at the same time a little concerning because it does still come up in life. It doesn't come up enough that I feel like she's been in any way hindered by not being able to read it at this point. So I guess my answer would be that I think somebody could learn it on their own if they're out in the world and feel like they aren't able to read what they need to read, but I don't think that it's something that our schools need to spend the time on because it's not impacting our kids' day-to-day lives at this point.
Okay. Dr. Peterson?
I'm just picturing how beautiful it would look into writing cursive LOL. Just so flowy. I feel like in my gut, I feel like learning cursive is an important skill. However, I think when we think about what we're competing with time-wise, that might fall to a lower priority level. I'm also thinking about my 8th grade son who can barely print and thinking about the challenge of teaching him cursive as well. Our kids spend so much time typing, and they're both already much more proficient typers than I am, and that probably is where the future is going. So as much as it hurts to say, I think that would be in my secondary list of priorities for the time that we have with our kids.
Thank you. The next question, we'll start with Dr. Peterson. Do you believe the United States is a Christian nation, and how will this affect your decision-making on the board?
I think that it's probably safe to say that the majority religion in the United States is Christianity, but I think that we've had many, 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 many court decisions that help us as a school board determine how religion should play into our schools, which if I could summarize those court cases, it would be religion shouldn't play a role in public education. Now, just to clarify my thoughts on that, we have policies in place at De Pere that fit very well within the very narrow range of court decisions. Our employees and our students are people. They have rights. They have a right to express their religious beliefs. They are not forced in any way to hide them, and I agree fully with that. However, when our teachers and staff, and for that matter, our administrators, our board members, when we are in our official role, we are government employees, and the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment tells us that we cannot promote any one religion or stop people from having their own religion. I think that that's clarified. It's one of the things that makes our country the land of the free. So I do believe that we have walked the perfect line at the De Pere School District between not enforcing or promoting any one religion, but allowing people to have their religious faith and opportunities to learn about faith where it's appropriate.
Yes, Ms. Hollison?
Let me just start by saying, going second after Matt on some of these questions, it's not fair. Yes, separation of church and state. I believe that this nation is predominantly Christian, and you can say that in some ways we default to Christianity as a nation, but that is definitely not inclusive of everybody, and it's not inclusive of everyone in our schools, and there's no reason to emphasize any religion within our schools. And I think our policies, like Matt said, allow the teachers and the students to have freedom to personally express, but there's explicit language in there that they're not allowed to practice or worship within the school bounds. So I think it really clearly defines what they are allowed and not allowed to do when it comes to having personal expression of their religion.
The next question will start with you, Ms. Tollefson, and that is, what is the best way to address differences of opinion on the board or between the board and administration?
So as I said earlier, I don't think there's anything wrong with disagreeing. I think it's actually wonderful if we have differing opinions on the board. That means our community is well represented by people sitting on the board. But I do think it's important that people hear each other, understand where each other is coming from, and hopefully can walk away saying, I understand why they made the decision that they made. I like the conversations and the communication that happens on the board. Obviously, I don't know what's happening during the closed sessions and behind scenes, and I know there's been discussion on the communications that's happening there. But from what I see in the open session, I think that it's communication, it's conversation, and it's everyone trying to get their point across about things that they feel passionate about, which is what school board members should be doing. They should be up there passionately advocating for the kids and for the people that they represent and from the community members that they're hearing from. So.
Dr. Peterson?
We save all of our agreement for closed session. I agree with really everything Brandy said. I think it's very important to have different perspectives on the school board or in any leadership organization. I think that's how the best ideas get filed down and sharpened and shined up, so that we can do things the best we can. I think what's key is to save the disagreement for the proper forums where there are forums for discussion, to keep those debates from becoming personal. You know, I think I've heard the phrase disagree without being disagreeable. I think that's an art form that potentially is starting to get lost in our country's discussion, and I think the school board can model that. And then what's most important is once a decision is made, let's say there's a 4-3 really, really tough decision, it really shouldn't matter whether you were one of the 4 or whether you were one of the 3. I think what needs to happen is that every single one of those board members needs to then go forward and do the best with the decision that's made. Fight our very human urge to talk about how, well, I didn't vote that way, and really make sure that we are doing our absolute best for the schools. And I think it's important for us to remember that people are watching. We are modeling for our kids how to disagree and then how to move forward after a disagreement is done. So we can be models that we would be thrilled to see our kids acting like, or we can be part of the problem.
The next question, we'll start with you, Dr. Peterson. What role do you believe the teachers' union should play in our district's education system?
Well, thank you for the question. I'm probably going to say teachers often in this answer, but please know that when I say teachers, I mean our staff, really everybody who works in the schools. They are the single most important entity that determines the success of our school. Why wouldn't we want their opinion when we're making big decisions? And why wouldn't we care what they think they need to do their jobs the best? So I hope that we can continue to have excellent communication with our teachers. As a school board member in De Pere, Wisconsin, I will not have any direct involvement over how our state does or doesn't change some of the decisions that have been made over the last couple of decades related to unionization in our schools. That's just not going to be something that I have a role in, in deciding or changing. However, I think as a school district, we will always be best if we are involving the people doing the work in our decision making, and then making sure that we are negotiating fairly to make sure that their working conditions are the best they can be, that they feel supported, that they feel excited to go to work every day, because those are going to be some awesome staff who are doing amazing work for our kids.
Ms. Tellefson?
So as far as the union, the teachers union, I don't have a lot of knowledge in how they interact directly with the board. So that would be something I would need to learn as a new board member. But as far as teachers in general, like I've said before, I believe that the teachers should be the ones advocating for what the changes that need to happen in the schools. I think we need to do everything we can to support the teachers. I guess I don't have a lot to say on that because I'm not really familiar with the functions of the union.
The next question will start with you, Ms. Tellefson. Please discuss the role you feel technology currently plays or should play in our classrooms. Do you favor more technology, less technology, or different technology?
The reality is that the world that we live in and the world that our kids are growing up in is just becoming more and more centered around technology. And for them to be successful members of society going forward, they need to have those skills. It's a hard balance for our teachers and our schools to find between getting them in front of analog books and paper and pencils and writing and spending time learning to type and learning to use computers and programs and all of the things that they're going to need when they get out in the world. So I think our schools right now do a really great job with that. I see my kids growing up with a real good balance of being able to live in both worlds. I think that our high school needs to grow in the opportunities for students to have access to different kinds of technology that would allow them to go into different fields leaving the school, which is part of why a new high school and the eventual capital referendum is just so important to keep our kids competitive with the other schools around us that have already done those kinds of improvements and have the facilities to offer courses that really help them learn skills that maybe if they're not choosing to go on to college right away or want to go into a trade, they have those skills coming out of high school and access to places to learn those. And I know that AI is becoming more and more of a thing. I'm stealing this from Matt because I know he wants to talk about it too. And you know, that's going to be a conversation that the board's going to have to address as it continues to become a larger and larger part of what people do in the real world. People are now using AI to write policies, to communicate with their staff, to communicate out into the world of what they're posting for their business, whatever. It's becoming a real thing. So at what point is that something that we need to adapt and be able to pivot to allow our students to start learning as well? So that's going to be an interesting conversation going in the future.
Dr. Peterson?
I'll just share, I guess, first a personal point of vulnerability, which is I am what you'd call a technology late adopter. I personally, just in my gut, I like handwriting and I like reading paper books, but that is not the world our kids are growing up in. So I think that our school is doing a fantastic job of making sure that our kids graduate with excellent technology skills, including some really fundamental skills that are really important. About things like how can you make sure that you're not leaving a negative reputation in the world through what you post on social media? How can you be a responsible user of technology? How can you be safe in a technology space? Those are all 21st century skills that we would not be serving our kids well if we weren't building. I think our school does provide technology for our kids in ways that, a decade ago would have seemed just outside the realm of possibilities, but now is just the state of the art of public education. Things like Chromebooks that are provided to our kids. I think that we're doing them a service by getting them used to using that technology. We're also saving ourselves a lot of problems by putting the right technology in their hands and technology we can control and keep them safe while they're learning those skills. And I also would agree with Brandy that we have some work to do in making sure that we're giving our kids some career pathway training for things like computer programming and really high-tech skills that soon will be the way of the world, even for our kids who aren't going to college. And also, to Brandy's point, I think we're going to have to continue to use artificial intelligence, which scares the bejesus out of me in some ways as a non-expert about artificial intelligence, but it offers us some amazing opportunities to do things like tutoring our kids 24/7, and we're just going to have to continue to keep up on that and use every tool at our disposal.
The next question, we'll start with you, Dr. Peterson. As a board member, what are your budget priorities?
My number one budget priority is to get fantastic education at the lowest possible cost. I know that's like a generic answer, but I mean, that's what we're shooting for. Right now, we've moved up to the 13th highest ranked school district out of 400 school districts in the state of Wisconsin in terms of our academic proficiency. That is really something to be proud of. We also are a very low spending school district when we think about money spent per kid. I think we can be proud about that too, and we can celebrate that. Education is a people intensive business. There is not a lot of fat to cut away when we're talking about budget cuts without impacting people. I think research that's been done by Harvard School of Education, that the money put in specifically to raises for teachers and staff comes back in terms of economic growth, home value rise, and I think we just have to keep educating our community about how their tax dollars are positively impacting the community. Even if maybe they don't have kids in the school district, those dollars come back to them in ways that maybe they can't always see and feel and touch. but are very much impacting the quality of their lives. I think that we can continue to be really smart and aggressive about resource sharing between school districts. I think that there are some ways that we can continue to find efficiencies in our budget when we think about how other school districts maybe have services that we can partner with them, services like the CISA organizations that we have, combine school district resources in smart ways, and we can also continue to look at our contracts that we have and find ways to save some money for our taxpayers.
Ms. Tellefson?
So again, as an accounting manager professionally, part of my job is also reviewing budgets and creating budgets with all of our managers yearly, and then reviewing them monthly and really looking at where things are going askew and where we can cut. And so I'm very familiar with really dissecting numbers, and it's really quite fun. I love it. So I'm really excited to get more involved in the budgets of the school. Personally, my goal is to really understand school funding and school budgeting, which is, if anybody's really sat through a lot of the referendum conversations or school board meetings on discussions about budget, Dawn, what is her job title? Business manager of the school, is so smart and such a good teacher on how to really understand the school's budgets, where all the funds are going, where they're coming from, and I just can't wait to learn more and more from her. Also, one other thing that I would like to look more into is if there's avenues for our school to take advantage of going more green that really can cause significant cost savings in the long run through less printing, upgraded lighting, better systems in our building, boilers, the heating systems, the HVACs, all of that, looking at where we can get grants to be able to do some upgrades that would save us money in the long run on energy costs and reduce printing, things like that, I think is something that we should look at.
Thank you. The next question, we'll start with Ms. Tellefson. What is the role of schools in teaching children about topics such as sex education, cyber safety, wellness, and bullying?
I think that kids need, I think those are kind of different topics. So I want to start with like the cyberbullying and online safety, all that. I think kids need to hear that from as many different people as they can. I think they need to hear that there are safe people to go report to. If they've made a mistake themselves, if somebody else is attacking them, they need to know that it's okay to go talk to somebody, whether that's their parents or whether that's a teacher. Like, they need to have those safe places. So the conversation is important to have. Of course, it always needs to be age appropriate and move up with the grades for what the kids are able to hear. As far as sex education, I think parents always have the option of opting out of any of the coursework that is around sex education. I personally feel like what is taught at the schools and the ages that it's taught have been appropriate for my kids. I haven't had any issues with anything that my kids have come home and asked questions about or been exposed to. If there are parents who feel differently, I would hope that they would be bringing that to the board and it could be discussed. If it's a consensus amongst the community that the age that these are being taught is not appropriate, or what's being taught at the ages isn't appropriate for that age, then I definitely think that's something that the board would look at and need to look at. But at this point, for me personally, I have been happy with everything that my kids have been taught at the ages that came.
Dr. Peterson?
Could you list the three things that were mentioned
Sure.
in the question?
It's regarding the role of the schools in teaching children about sex education, cyber safety, wellness, and bullying.
I agree with a lot of what Brandy said, and I really like what Brandy said about how we really our kids can't hear some of these things too much, and from multiple people. I think that's really, really beneficial. Just a funny anecdote about living in a small community. Our backyard neighbor is the school nurse, and so she has delivered some of those changing body talks to my kids, which has led to some my kids not being able to make eye contact for a few days with our neighbor. I think they do a fantastic job of keeping the information as comfortable and accessible to kids as possible. And really, part of this is a well-rounded character education, which I think our kids are getting at the De Pere schools. And I'll also just throw in about cyberbullying. I'm glad that the school teaches about cyberbullying. I am not an expert in that field at all. I don't have much to offer my kids. In fact, I often learn from them through the schools about cyber threats. That's something that my generation didn't have to learn about in third grade and in sixth grade and in ninth grade again. So I'm really thankful to the schools for keeping up with what kids need to know to be a functional citizen in 2024.
Thank you. The next question will start with Dr. Peterson. How do you plan to measure and evaluate the success of your tenure on the board?
I think a big goal for me personally, if I was fortunate enough to be elected to this role and have 3 years to continue what I've been doing for the last 6 months, I would really like to see at the end of that 3 years that the school is on a trajectory to handle the growth that we have in the district in a way that maintains the excellent education that we're providing. I don't know exactly what that plan will look like right now, and it does involve a lot of community partnership. I think that's exciting. I think it's an exciting next 3 years to be part of the De Pere School Board because we have a lot of big decisions to make. But the cool thing is that we're making them from a position of strength. There are many other districts who would love to have the problems that we have of people wanting to live here and moving in and building new homes in this district. And would love to be looking at increasing enrollments rather than declining enrollments and therefore declining revenue. So we're at an amazing place. However, the schools have to reflect our community. And that means that I think the board and our administration and our teachers over the next 3 years are going to be involved in a lot of communication back and forth with our community to make sure that whatever plan we come up with is something that everybody feels really proud about and is generally on board with. I would love to see, I'll just throw in one more piece here. I would love to see our math and English scores continue to increase as well. I would feel immense pride if I was one of the 7 board members during the period where we continued that growth and maybe even moved up in the state rankings from where we are at number 13.
Ms. Tallison?
So I've already said this a couple of times, but again, I think my biggest measure would be when I'm out in the community, if I'm not hearing from people that they don't understand why I made decisions I made, that I'm being clear and communicative with the community and people, even if they don't agree, or at least acknowledging that they understand where I'm coming from. Also, if people are coming up and discussing things with me, that they feel like they're being heard and represented on the board as decisions are being made. I would love to do a second term because that would get me at least through my daughter being in high school. So another big measure would be running again in 3 years and leaving it to the voters to decide if they think that I'm doing a good job or not. And I feel like that's kind of the clearest way to know how I'm doing on the board.
Thank you. The next question, we'll start with Ms. Tallison. How would you encourage collaboration and partnerships between the school district, local businesses, and community organizations?
I think that we would benefit from more partnerships with businesses in our community in programs that work for the kids, to be able to have access to internships or programs within the school where they can earn credits while learning those real life skills. Again, not every student is going on to college right after high school, and many of them having that opportunity, that foot in the door, just gives them that head start as they're leaving high school and leaving De Pere. And that should be our goal, is to make sure even the ones who are not going away to a 2-year or 4-year school are leaving with a vision in mind of where they want to go, with some skills and quick access to feeling like they're becoming a successful adult in our community. What that looks like personally, I don't have any plan for, but I do know that it's something that has been discussed amongst the board members, and it's something that I would definitely advocate for and want to to explore more as a board member, and go out and start talking to some of the businesses in the community and look for ways. I would like to be part of that process of looking for ways to make that happen within our schools.
Dr. Peterson?
I love a lot of what Brandy said about internships and opportunities to get our kids into local businesses and maybe our businesses into the schools. I think that just to build on some of those thoughts that Brandy had, I think that as we're considering the plans to build a new high school, there will be some opportunities. This doesn't work for every type of industry and every type of business, but there's some examples that we have in Northeast Wisconsin of select businesses like auto dealers sponsoring parts of a new school that are maybe the auto shop that students are working in. So there's shared interest in those auto dealers getting our students well trained and then hopefully hired when they graduate to Pere High School. That would be, of course, potentially financially helpful to us as we're planning these new schools and thinking about what opportunities we can afford to offer and where we need to cut back. I think that's a place where we could have some really specific conversations with local industry. And then I hope that we'll just overall continue to have open communication with our community. I think we've had some really great, in the last year, some really great community forums where we invite people and organizations in with the opportunity to hear directly from school leaders, but also the school leaders are listening, and they're listening really intently to what kind of school this community wants to support. We've also talked recently at our school board several times about opportunities to live stream or offer recordings at least of our board meetings, and that I think just continues to open up engagement of the entire community so that everybody knows what's going on and can feel like they're a part of it.
The next question, we'll start with Dr. Tellefson or Dr. Peterson. What should your school district do to better prepare students as citizens?
There's one of my favorite quotes is from an author named F. Scott Fitzgerald, and I'm probably going to butcher the quote a little bit, but the point of the quote is the best sign of a excellent intellect is the ability to hold two ideas in your head at the same time and still function. And I think that's something that has been degrading in our country over the last 25 years. The ability to understand that different schools of thought exist and still be able to potentially have a conversation with somebody who doesn't agree with you. So I think that probably the biggest thing that we can do for our students is train them in the art of disagreeing without being disagreeable. How can you find a person who maybe disagrees with you on 90% of issues and then attack that 10% you agree on and make some progress? That used to be something that our country and our government prided itself on. We've lost that over time, and I think that this generation of kids that we're training could help us get back on track if we teach them those skills, but also model the skills so that they can see that that's an important art that they can master.
Ms. Tellefson?
So our schools talk a lot about college readiness and the statistics of how many of our students are college ready. And I know from my personal experience over this last year having a freshman in college that he was not emotionally ready. He struggled with the transition, and as I spoke with other parents about, people asking how he's doing, and I was honest about how he was doing, I heard almost everybody say, oh, my kid went through that too, or my cousin went through that too, or my sister went through that too, and I'm really proud of him. He's doing great this semester. You know, he stumbled for a minute, but has found his ways of improving his own mental health and making it through. But I wish that the school had talked more about that aspect of college readiness and really preparing our kids what it's like to leave high school and go out into the world. I know a lot of parents would like to see more classes around what the real world is like, classes that help kids learn how to do their taxes, learn how to do the things out in the real world. And that's something that I would really like to look at and explore with the administration and teachers is there ways that we can talk about college readiness, but also talk about the bad and not all make it seem so, you know, this is what you have to do. It's really fun. This is the way it's supposed to be. But really like the challenges that are going to come from that so that they're prepared for them, because I think being prepared for challenges makes it a lot easier to face them.
The next question, we'll start with Ms. Tollefson. You are one voice, but the board makes decisions. Can you speak to your ability to build consensus when your opinion is in the minority?
I believe as a board member, if your opinion is in the minority and you're not fighting for that opinion because that is what you are hearing from the people, but it's just your own personal opinion, then you need to really look at how to get into agreement with the majority. Because as Matt said earlier, even if it's 4-3 and the 4 passes, you need to be able to support every decision that the board makes. I would never actively support anything that I felt harmed our teachers or students, obviously, but I also don't believe that the board has that in their heart to ever harm. And everybody is there doing what they believe is best.
Dr. Peterson?
I would say that I'm an educator and not a salesman, and I really try to share why I feel the way I do with facts and with supporting resources in a way that hopefully allows people to see where I'm coming from and that my position is supported by facts. As Brandy said, if that's not enough to sway the majority of the board members, then it is my role and my duty to get on board with the decision made by the majority of the board. And from that point on, from the point the discussion is done and the vote has been taken, my job is to take that decision and make the best, execute the best possible solution that can happen. And I hope that we, as board members, will continue to fight that very human urge that we all have that I mentioned before, when things aren't going well, to say, well, remember 9 months ago I said that I didn't want to do this. That can't exist in a well-functioning board. So it's our duty to take the rule of the majority and make the best of the situation.
The next question, we'll start with Dr. Peterson. Is there a particular issue that motivates you to serve on the Board of Education?
Yes. Just kidding. Yes, there is. I mentioned this in my introduction. I firmly believe that our education system has left some kids behind. For the 200 or so years we've been doing public education in the United States, we have served many people very well, and we have left a whole bunch of people behind. And I am never going to give up the notion that I've got in my heart that there is a way that we can reach every kid and help them succeed. Success won't look the same for every kid. It shouldn't look the same for every kid. We don't need necessarily to turn out, every child learning calculus and going to medical school. So that might be success for one kid. But through having the best possible people working with our kids, as well as the resources and systems in place to give kids a lot of options, there are definitely ways, and I just know it, we're not there yet, but there are ways that we can make sure that every kid has a route to a successful education that leaves them ready for life, ready for a career that they enjoy, that feels important to them. And if I ever stop feeling that way, I will get out of this business, because I think that's what gets educators out of bed in the morning.
Ms. Tollefson?
So one thing I didn't mention in my intro is the amount I volunteer at our schools. I was the Dickinson PTO treasurer for 3 years. For the last 3 years, I run the concession stand at Novak Field and Cloud Field, which is the soccer field, and the football field at the high school. I was part of the community task force. I was part of the group that helped save Legion Pool and got that referendum successfully passed. And I just really believe in having a voice in the community. When I look at the current school board, I don't see myself represented on the school board. Living in De Pere, if I'm elected, I will be the only board member that lives in the city of De Pere limits, which I think is an important point when the majority of our population still lives in the city of De Pere, and we need to see that representation. I also think for a lot of years there's been a lack of representation of women on the board, and so I've always intended to run at some point, and being on the task force this last summer really opened my eyes to what I can bring to the board to try and help the school district and help educate the public on what's going on with the referendum. Attending board meetings, I know I have opinions and thoughts to offer to the discussions that are happening there, and so it motivated me to run now.
This is our last question, and we'll start with Ms. Tollefson. What attributes and behaviors are essential for school board members?
I mean, again, the biggest thing is being able to listen, and not just listen, but really hear what people are saying and take that and turn that into action when necessary. I think listening to our teachers and administrators and the staff at the schools, listening to the students, listening to concerns, but also the positives, and really making sure that we're emphasizing the good in our school. I think it's interesting that people keep talking about the misuse of, whether we're using our funds appropriately, whether we're budgeting appropriately, when in reality, we're the last district to go to referendum. If anything, we have done the best with the funds that we have without having to go out to the public until now, and just really educating people on that those are positives, not negatives, and really building up our schools. They're 13th in the state. They're the highest ranking school in Northeast Wisconsin. Like, we need to be celebrating that and listening to what's working and continuing on that and building.
I love what Brandy said. I think that good board members are cheerleaders for the school, and they're out being loud and proud about how great things are in the school district, even when they know that there are challenges. So I think that's something that's definitely an attribute that needs to be looked for in board candidates. Somebody who's willing to say positive things about our school every chance they get. We're really bragging on our kids and our teachers and staff every chance we can. I'll also throw out that the process of preparing for a board meeting I found to be fairly time consuming. So I think one of the attributes that I assumed was true, but now I know for sure, is that you have to be somebody who really cares about this stuff, because we're not doing it for the money. We're doing it as an active community service, and when those board books come and they're 90 pages long with really, really small font and lots of little tiny numbers that add up probably over the course of 5 pages, we got to care a lot about that, and that's not something that can be faked. Brandy mentioned we have to be good listeners, and I think that's that's essential. We have to listen to a whole bunch of different points of view and be able to think big picture about how all of those perspectives are probably right, but how they all have to fit together like a puzzle in order to make this thing go. And then I think that there has to be some sense of wonder and curiosity about how learning happens that adds to the happiness of seeing good things happening in the classroom. As a board member, we get to hear from our principals and from our teachers and students, and we got to get excited about that.
Thank you. We do have 2 more questions that came forward. Are there any more? If you do have questions, please hold up your card and one of our league members will pick them up. So we'll start with Dr. Peterson. What are your thoughts on your school district's programs for special ed students, ELL, and gifted students?
I think that we do spend a fair amount of time talking about our special ed programming, and what I have learned in my short time on the board is just how much care and empathy our staff and our leaders have for kids with special needs, and the high expectations that are set for those students, both in terms of learning and behavior. I have been wildly impressed with the services that we provide for our kids who need more than maybe the next kid. I think that we do that in a way that again just has a lot of empathy and care behind it. I also have found that our school staff partners extremely closely and positively with families, and I think our families of special ed children and ELL children probably even get more attention and more partnership, because we know that the very best thing we can do for that kid is work closely with their family, so that what happens at school and what happens at home are in unison and synergy. I don't want to brag, but I've had a little bit of experience as a parent for our programs that we have for gifted and talented, and feel that we do a really good job pushing our kids. However, across the board, and this is not just for gifted and talented students, across the board, our teachers set really high expectations for our kids, and that's of course where kids will thrive and grow, is when a lot is expected of them, and then the resources are given to support them as well.
Thank you. Ms. Tollefson?
This is not something that I have any experience with my own kids or kids that I know in the community. So this is something that I would look forward to learning a lot more about if I was on the board, and would not venture to have an answer to this question at this time.
We'll start with the next, this will be the last question, I believe, and we'll start with you, Ms. Tollefson. How can the board be accessible to the community?
And Matt touched on this earlier, but I know there's a community push, and within the board itself, to find a way to get the meetings televised in some way, recorded, so that people can watch them later if they aren't able to attend at the time of the meeting. I think that is a very important step. For those of you who haven't been at board meetings where this has been discussed, the biggest hurdle is the cost in getting the equipment and in doing the closed captioning that is required by the schools. If they are putting anything out on video, there's costs associated with the software that would allow for that to happen. I think that's important. I think board members who show up in the community, I'm at all the Friday night football games, well, mostly because I have to be, I'm at the concession stand, but I'm at, the basketball games. I'm going to Chicago Street when I can't go to the away games and watching them with the community. I feel like I am somebody who is very accessible to parents and community members. I'm surprised as I'm knocking on doors how many people I already know or know their face, and we kind of recognize each other. So I think that is just a really important piece, is the board members getting out putting themselves in an environment where people can approach them and talk to them, where maybe they might not know how to look up board members' emails or think about doing that, but if they see you in person, they think, oh, while you're here, I'm going to tell you, and being able to hear from the community and in those avenues as well in person is important.
Dr. Peterson?
I would say, I think I stated my agreement with this earlier, but I do support the processes that we're looking at to make board meetings more accessible for people who want to watch them at home, live perhaps, if we can make that work in a budget-conscious way, or at least watch recordings, because I think that will continue to build confidence and comfort in knowing the direction of the schools and the business of the schools. So I do support that. And I also think what Brandy said is exactly true. We have to be out in the community, and we have to be the type of people that are approachable enough that someone who doesn't know us very well but maybe knows our role feels comfortable walking up and having a conversation with us. We have to be the kind of listeners who make that a comfortable conversation. And if we do that once or twice, we have opened up communication that hopefully will continue. I think overall our board members are trying their very best to be at every activity that we can, cheering really, really loud, and then also using those as opportunities to talk to the people that we're sitting in the stands with or serving nachos with, just because those are chances for really informal conversations that build relationships and establish trust. And then hopefully we won't have a lot of really tense, high-stress issues popping up, but when they do pop up, it's those relationships that you built over nachos that you can lean on.
Thank you. It's time now for the closing statements, and we will begin with a 2-minute closing statement offered by each of our candidates, and we'll start with Ms. Tollefson.
Well, first I want to thank the League of Women Voters for putting this on and giving us an opportunity to, in person or on video, express ourselves. It is hard to communicate out to the public in these races without something like this, so I really appreciate that. And thank you to everyone who came in person and has been giving us smiling faces and offering questions for us to be able to answer. I'm really excited at the opportunity to be on the school board and do the work. I'm really excited to learn more about how our schools work. I am doing my best to get up to speed and learn as much as I can. I've been attending all of the school board meetings. I feel like I'm ready to hit the ground running, but I know that there's still a lot of work involved in that and so much to learn. I'm doing this because our kids deserve it, my kids deserve it, and I see a vision for our schools that is a very bright future and continuing to grow in the direction that our schools are already going. And I just want to be there to help support that and facilitate that in the direction that our teachers and our administration are already taking the schools. I don't believe that there's anything that I need to come in and change immediately or alter, because we are ranked 13th in the state. Our kids have a high rate of college attendance. They have a high rate of graduation. We're doing a really good job. Things can always be improving. That's true for any situation, but we're starting from such an amazing place, and I just really hope that you choose me on April 2nd to continue that vision for our community, and I promise that I will do the work.
Dr. Peterson?
I also want to thank the League Women Voters for putting this event on. I want to thank all of you for being part of democracy by being here today and asking questions. And for those of you who are watching this recording or watching at home, thank you very much for your engagement as well. I feel I've learned something by being part of this because of the questions that were asked, and that's why this is such a vital part of democracy for candidates to put themselves out in front of people and be asked questions in public where answers where we can be held accountable for what we say. So thank you. I've been on the board for 5 months, and I already can feel that the work is important and the time that I've been putting in is important and deeply rewarding. And I hope that I've earned a chance to do this for another 3 years. I feel that I bring some expertise to this role because of my career in education, but I think that probably is second to the passion that I bring for learning and for creating the right culture for every kid to succeed. I've said it earlier tonight, but I'll say it again. The single most important asset we have working for us are the people who work in the De Pere School District, our teachers and our staff, and we owe it to them to give them all the resources that they need to do that tough job of training our kids to be skilled, knowledgeable, responsible citizens moving forward. And thank you very much for the time that you've given me tonight to tell you about why I want this job. Thank you.
Thank you. In closing, I'd like to begin by thanking our candidates, Brandy Tellefson and Matt Peterson, for their participation in this democratic process and by sharing your positions and your perspectives with us. It's been very interesting. Our audience, thank you for attending the forum and for submitting your thoughtful questions. And I'd like to extend a thank you and appreciation to our Vice President, Dawn Smith, to my right, for coordinating this forum, and our timekeepers, Don and Jean Dahlstrom, and also to Lynn Meschke, Denise Gomer-Hutchinson, and Christine Lemeron, League members who helped in planning and carrying out the forum as well. As a reminder, this recording will be available on the League of Women Voters Greater Green Bay Facebook page.